And good morning. I didn't know it's morning for Dani, afternoon for me. And welcome to another episode of Conversations with Carrie and Dani. We're just kind of thinking and trying to decide what we wanted to talk about. And I know Dani, you had something on your heart that you wanted to kind of start a conversation with, and we'll get started.
Um, so I was watching Good News Fellowship yesterday. I think you've seen a couple of them. Peter Dixon does them. Good News Fellowship's just a weekly Bible study, like non-denominational church meet thing. And the guy that I was watching, the guy that spoke, I didn't watch it live, and it was a guy called Dale Caldwell, Caldwell. And it was amazing listening to his stories. And I felt I felt really sad listening to them. My neighbor, I got a phone call. My neighbor can be hard to get hold of and um, has phone issues sometimes. And I got a phone call to pass a message on to her that one of her friends was in hospital, that she had tried to commit suicide. And I'd actually met this friend. She came down. She lives up in the other island, and she comes down to visit. And she came last time she came down. I took a loaf of fresh bread down, and there were two of them. She brought someone with her, and I had a wonderful time. We ate fresh sourdough with, melted butter on it, and we talked for
Mm.
hours. And I'm glad I got to meet her. She was the loveliest lady, and it was the funniest thing to discover that we actually had some connections. So we got to talking, and so my neighbor doesn't believe in, she believes in God, but not a Christian God type thing.
Hmm.
But a very, very spiritual lady. And it was quite a surprise to find her friend had started attending in the little town she lived in, her local Adventist church.
Hmm.
I don't know if she had any previous history, but she had been attending when I met her, the Adventist church, not all the time, but off and on. She did drink a lot of alcohol, probably class her as an alcoholic. And I don't know how that I've attended the church she was going to. I don't think that would have gone down very well up there. Very legalistic, very about
Hmm.
if you love God, he'll fix and heal everything, including your issues, your problems, your emotional shit. And
Hmm.
yeah, really strict on diets and health and Sabbath, and giant Ellen White fans.
Hmm. Oh
Um,
yeah.
giant Ellen White followers and fans. So I didn't say anything much about it. I just like, oh yeah. And then I discovered that the friend she brought with her actually had lived really close to one of my friends that still lives up there, and they know each other. So, that little connection was cool.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I was really sad to pass a message on to my neighbor because they couldn't get hold of her, to say that her friend that I'd met had tried to commit suicide and she was in hospital and it didn't look possible. And I was feeling really sad because she passed away on the weekend. There's always lots of complicating factors
Hmm.
with suicide, and I don't want to go into the whole I don't want to go into the whole depression and stuff like that. There's always factors. But I felt really sad after listening to Dale's meeting program and hearing him talk about God and stuff. I thought, would she still be alive if she had met the God that he talked about? If
Mm.
she'd met a
Mhm.
different God, would she be alive now? Depressed but alive. And one of the things my neighbor had said to me was that off and on over the last, little while, is that she spent more time at church, was that she'd quite often phone when she had been drinking and she was depressed. And I know drinking can depress your central nervous system, but one of the things that she would talk about when she called my neighbor and cry about and get stressed about
Connection paused for a second there, Dani.
was the whole
There you go.
end of time. If you've
Mm-hmm.
got some unstable internet, if you've
Yeah.
got somebody that's distressed and upset and they're mentally fragile, they don't need to meet a legalistic God.
Right.
If they're sad because if they're sad always at this time of year because their son committed suicide,
Hmm.
they don't need to meet or attend a church. Sadly, she ended up in an Adventist church. She doesn't need to meet a church where they say, well, your husband was a pastor. You can tell us what the church believes about
Hmm.
suicide. But my understanding is that They wouldn't have been saying to her, yeah, just be patient, be hopeful, you'll see your son in heaven.
Yeah, and it's so I think, and I asked my husband about that, about what was the official view of the Adventist church, and I did a very brief Google search. So this is not by any means exhaustive. I'm sure there are some Adventists out that may argue with some of the points I'm going to make or some of the things I'm going to say. But this is from my lived experience as being married to somebody who worked for the church for 20 years and growing up in the Adventist church. Um, my understanding was that it was almost viewed as kind of like the unpardonable sin, but not exactly, because it's a sin that, you die before you get a chance to confess the sin. So in Adventism, I mean, you have to confess all sin before you pass. Otherwise, there's a written record where it hasn't been crossed off.
Yeah,
However, even when I was an active member of the Adventist church, I did have a friend of the family that did commit suicide because of a very deep depression that he was in, and mental illness and loss of medication and just a lot. And I think though that luckily the Lord in his grace and the grace that he has is incredibly unfair. He gives grace to those of us who don't deserve it, which is amazing. He is the only one that can judge the true heart of somebody and to give them grace. Personally, I believe that people don't commit suicide typically in a vacuum. There's something else going on that drove them to it. I am very glad that God is the judge and he is the one that's going to let us know. And so for me to definitively say one way or the other, what's going to happen with somebody's salvation after they do something like that, that's not my place to say. But the amazing thing, and thinking about the unfairness of grace makes me think of the parable of the workers. I
yeah,
don't know if you're familiar with that one, Danny. The
yeah.
one where the master of the vineyard, I'm just gonna off the cuff, as I remember, this is Carrie's paraphrase, right? So be forgiving, y'all, if I get it wrong. Um, it was harvest time and he needed a bunch of workers to help in his vineyard. So he goes to the town square. And that was custom of that time, was to go to the town square and grab a few people. The day laborers would just kind of hang out in the square and wait for somebody to come and ask for them to come and work. So he came and he grabbed some and said, I'm going to pay you a fair wage. Let's go. So they went and they worked. And then he's like, man, I need more guys. So he goes back to the town square and gets more a few hours later. And they keep working. I will pay you a fair wage. And they're like, sure, let's work. And I think it's 3 or 4 or 5 times throughout the day he goes and gets people and says, yep, let's work. I'm going to pay you a fair wage. So at the end of the day, when they're done, he goes to pay people, and I believe the standard wage for somebody who's worked for a full day was 1 denarii, something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just put it in terms we can maybe understand. It was understood that they'd probably get, say, $100 at the end of the day, just for working their tail off, which is actually a little less than they should get in today's economy. But let's go for $100. It's a nice round number. So the guys that showed up at the very end of the day and only worked a few hours, he called them up first and gave them money, and they got $100. They're like, sweet, this is awesome. We didn't deserve this. We worked really hard. And then he calls up the next group that was working a little bit longer. He also gives them the same amount of money. And it keeps going. And even the people he got at the crack of dawn, he gave them $100. And of course, those people were upset because they had worked their tail off. I mean, I know if that was the case and I had worked my tail off through the entire day and I got the same amount of money as somebody who'd only worked for a couple hours in the evening, I wouldn't be happy about it. But
No.
God gets to be the one that says this is your wage. I mean, to the last minute, you talk about deathbed deathbed salvations and all this stuff. We all get the same reward in heaven. And the thief on the cross is, he got to go to heaven and he was only alive for maybe hours. We don't know. So it's I am so glad that grace is not fair, because if it was up to me, there's a lot of people that God's going to send to heaven that I probably wouldn't want to be there. I wouldn't think they deserve it. You know, it's
Yeah.
yeah, and thinking too of the unfairness of grace, you think about the prodigal son as well, and the young man who basically he asked for his inheritance, and in that culture, if you say to your dad, I want whatever I was going to get when you died, now I don't want to wait, it's essentially wishing that your father was dead.
Harsh.
That's the culture, you know. So even though he said, Dad, I wish you were dead, give me all your money, he went and blew it all, then comes back and his dad is still welcoming him with open arms and a feast. And was the older brother happy about that? He wasn't either, you know. So it's it's just awesome, the unfairness of grace. And I think, I don't know if Dani, were those parables that you really had much understanding of when you were growing up in the Adventist church, or
Um, they're ones that are talked about a lot, like all the time. So, did you go to an Adventist school?
mhm, yeah.
You did? Yep. So I went to an Adventist school right through all my schooling, as well as all the youth groups and stuff. And so they're parables that get talked about all the time.
Hmm.
But I guess they feel a bit different now that I've left. They feel a bit different now that I'm not reading. Um, I was gonna say not. I was gonna say Ellen White's version of them, but I don't know if she has a version that's different. But because I grew up in a home that talked a lot about Ellen White stuff, it's like you could someone would read those Bible stories to me, and then I would filter them through the glasses of Ellen White because
Hmm.
that's how I grew up. So the story about that, I mean, how amazing is it to hear and think that everybody got paid the same. So everybody got the same reward for their day's work.
Hmm.
So when you look at our lives here, the unfairness of grace, everybody gets the same reward. And the reward isn't based on how long we work or our works full stop.
Hmm.
It's actually based on Jesus. It's based on the vineyard, on the owner. Um,
There was kind of a cognitive dissonance, though, I think, growing up with all of that, where and I had very briefly skimmed Christ object lessons about the workers, and it was just, it seemed to me like it was just talking in circles, you know. And
yeah.
there was a lot of, yes, but, yes, we're saved by grace, and God gets to do the grace, but we've got to do all of these works in order to earn it, you know.
Yes.
And you could lose your salvation in an instant, if you um and I kind of always use the analogy that I do know, as a teenager and a young adult, and you're driving along, and you're like, and the roads are really bad, and you're like, what if I die in a car accident today? And my last thought was not a happy, kind one, because I guarantee you it wouldn't be, especially if I saw somebody ready to hit me, or whatever. And that was almost hinted to me, then that was the belief that I kind of had, but it didn't make sense. Like, it didn't mesh with my idea of God, even though that was what I believed. Like, not what I believed, but that was what I kind of felt like I was taught, if that makes
Wow.
sense.
Well, it doesn't, because when I hear that, I'm like, oh wow, Carrie, you're so lucky it didn't mesh with your view of God, because I just recall swallowing it all, hook, line, and sinker.
Hmm.
And they used to say to us at school, what if you die on the way home from school? What if your bus crashes? What if, and you haven't forgiven, whoever you've been arguing with, or you haven't, it was always about, forgiving someone. It's just, oh, it was a burden to carry all the time. And
Hmm.
of course, so I'd hear those parables that you're reading and the parables of the worker. And I guess there was, as I got older anyway, not when I was really young, but as I got older, there was a part of me that would be like, wow, that's amazing. I'm so glad that grace, our reward is based on the person giving it and who they are and their character, not on the work that I do. And then my brain would go, and that's wonderful. The grace is incredible. Except, of course, we're all judged by our knowledge. And because I have extra special knowledge because I belong to the remnant church, then it doesn't apply to me the same, but that applies to those other people. I mean, how unbiblical is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and I do believe that we are held accountable to the light we are given, to a certain extent, but I, there was so much cognitive dissonance growing
Well,
up
see,
that
then
just didn't make sense.
the whole what you, it becomes then a definition too of what you believe of what you've been given. One of the hardest things for me over the last couple of years has been is to read the Bible and see exactly what's there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
People would say to me all the time, I'd comment on stuff in Facebook groups, and they'd be like, just read the Bible, just see exactly what God says. And they don't understand. They don't understand, okay? If you've been told your whole life that that's red,
Mm-hmm.
that's all you know, that's red.
Yeah.
And every time you see this color, you think it's red.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's really hard to look at it and not see red. So when I've been told from the minute I could was, I don't have any memories that, and I have no memories that predate being read Ellen White stories, especially when those Bible stories that you brought up and one of those a couple of weeks back. I don't have any memories that predate stories of the Bible that are influenced by Ellen White. So it's really hard to look at them and
Mm-hmm.
see something that I look at it and I see what I've been taught to see.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I was,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and that's there's a lens there, and you just can't ignore. I mean, it's deprogramming. And one of the things that former Adventist Fellowship is another channel that I think is very helpful. Um, she said, I think it was her, that just sit down and read Galatians through every day. Just read it without anything else, without interpretation. And I will say, um, it's kind of a side rabbit trail. As I was exploring, let's say, other options for church, let's just leave it at that. And reading Galatians, like, why did I not see any of this stuff before? You know? So I get out, I went online, and a few years ago, the Sabbath School Quarterly was Galatians. And so I got it out and I was looking at it. It's online. And I think they were like into week 2 before they actually focused on reading Galatians.
Yeah.
I think because they had to lay the foundation, because Galatians is to me kind of was one of the turning points. And then
Yep.
also another thing, did you ever have a marked Bible? Did you ever do the Bible marking classes?
Um, my
Do you
whole
ever?
Bible's marked and written through, but I don't think we had specific classes like you're talking about.
So, and that's something I could talk about in another video. But we had this was when early on in my husband's ministry, we got these audio tapes and we were listening, and it could, you got a set of colored pencils, and you basically went through, and what it did was guide you through studies. I think there was 28 of them, proof texting all of the 28 beliefs. And so instead of reading the Bible, then you're bouncing back and forth. I do have the notebook. I think this is it. So just for example, how um so I went through and just wrote down the verses
Yeah.
and the studies. The first one, and I did this a couple years ago. I'm surprised the notebook was just sitting right here. The first study was on the Bible, so it's, a nice assortment of verses through. Second one was on God, origin of evil, divinity of Christ, salvation. I get I get into one of these, kind of a bit of a binge on something, I guess is the best term I can come with, just to look at it. And
Yeah.
was it
So
there was
back off
one,
yeah.
I can't remember, but it was basically you went back and forth between two different Instead of just reading through, you had to read here, back there, and back.
Okay.
I can't find it. We're gonna have to do another.
No, no, just leave that. You were talking about the lesson quarterly, did Galatians,
Yeah.
but before Galatians they did, and then I missed what you said. What, before they started Galatians, they had to introduce it or something, you said?
Yeah, so the first few days of the, in the Sabbath School quarterly, you've got Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So the first week or so was basically giving background about the book of Galatians before they went into Galatians. So it almost felt to me like we can't just study Galatians. We have to have background of what other places in the Bible say to try to inoculate you against the pure, simple truth of what you can find in Galatians. So that's something that people can read for themselves. Just sit down and
See,
read it.
people told me that, but I was so indoctrinated in my brain that I couldn't see it. I honestly couldn't see it. And I
Mm-hmm.
read through Galatians and I read through it and read through it. And then SDA Q&A, Peter Dixon's channel, I watched a program with Frank Merendino on Galatians. And
Mm-hmm.
he was talking about old and new covenants and stuff. And I watched the program. And then I think Emma did another one as well. And it was about oh, nearly 18 months, 2 years back. And I watched this program on Galatians and I was like, what? And it's like all of a sudden, for the first time, I could see it. I could see it. And I was like, wow, how did I miss it? How did I not see it? And I was so excited. I took a pile of notes and I listened to it twice and I wrote it all down. And I was like, the gospel is so clear. You cannot read Galatians and not understand that I'd been lied to,
Mm-hmm.
or misled.
There's
And the
something,
crazy
there's a
thing,
switch that has to be hit in your brain to see it
it
that
was so, when I watched Frank's stuff on SDAQ and it was so clear. But what happened was this. I was so excited about it and it just opened up who God's character really is. It helped me really see the whole grace thing. And for a moment I got excited, like some of those other people that I see on videos. And then I went out and I had to, they had to do dinner and shovel poo for the horses and fill hay nets and feed chickens and do my normal stuff. And by the next day, I remember thinking, what was I excited about? And so I picked up Galatians in my Bible and I read it and I couldn't see it again. So I got my notes and I read through it and I was like, and I'm like, no, it really is there. And it was like something in my subconscious just kept sucking the truth away. It's just, oh, it is so hard to take off those filtered lenses and see the Bible as it's actually written, not for what I've been told is there. And I don't know if it gets easier when you're younger to do it or what, but I mean, I was dealing with over 50 years of it and it was so hard. But I didn't give up on it. I knew that I knew there was a truth there in Galatians that God wanted me to see and it was going to change my life. I had no
yeah.
idea how much.
And it's, I
But
mean, and for me it was a blessing that my husband and I kind of we made that journey at the same time but separately.
okay.
So it was kind of, we were both processing out at the same time, but we certainly had our own journeys because we have very different, we both have baggage, but it's different baggage,
Yeah.
you know,
It
which
would have
which
been really
doesn't
helpful
necessarily
for
make
me.
sense because we've been
Yeah.
together for 26 years at this point. But it's very, you can move through life and it to side by side and have very different experiences.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's one of my favorite little meme pictures on Facebook is the Chihuahua and the Great Dane. And one of
yes,
them's got mud up to here, and one's got mud only this far up its legs, and it says we both experience the same things differently.
yeah. I mean, it's so true, because I think I was shielded from a lot of the drama he had to deal with as a pastor because I wasn't in the board meetings. I wasn't in, all of that nitty gritty nasty stuff,
Yeah.
so, but of course I had to deal with a lot of the aftermath, and stuff. So it's tough. A lot of things we've all been through, and I think our and I think that that's really the message with grace and everything. I know we're at 26 minutes, but I think we could probably wrap it at this point. if you
Yeah,
want
come
to.
back to grace.
But I think grace is the beauty of grace is God looks at the whole of our heart, what we've been through. Also, I do believe he erases the sin, and I think that that's something that Adventism teaches. Like he does, it's almost like he sets them aside, but doesn't like throw them away completely. And then if you screw up again, it's not just that one screw up, it's all the other screw ups that get put back on you. Like they aren't actually gone. Does that make sense? That was the impression that I was under. Was that you can, if you can, you get forgiven of everything, but you screw up again, then you're accountable for all of it. And grace is just awesome. We don't have to worry about that. Does this mean we have a free pass to sin? No, it doesn't. But God has so much grace and love for us that I believe he wants as many people as possible to get to heaven, you know? And I'm very thankful for that. I think that one of the things that really for me was another one of the nails in the coffin of Adventism for me was the verse that says, as he's separating the sheep from the goats, get away from me, I never knew you. Like you didn't actually, you haven't treated all of these people the way that they need to be treated. You've not been kind, you've not been loving, you haven't visited people in jail, you haven't done all of these things. If it was really just the Sabbath, wouldn't that be what it was?
Yeah.
That's how he
And you're
separates the sheep from the goats at the end, is how did we have love for one another?
and you're right. That is, yeah, you're right. I think it's really important to notice that at the end, and I was always taught that that verse about, oh, you never knew me and blah blah blah, that was specifically you won't get into that, but I had some weird beliefs about that. I was taught stick to the point. The point is that at the end there, where that's quoted, Jesus doesn't, it's not about theology.
Mm-hmm.
He's not saying, you're right, he's not saying, he says it's about lived stuff. It's about lived stuff. Like you said, you weren't nice to the poor, you didn't feed the hungry, you didn't love everybody, you didn't love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing in there about theology.
And
Not saying theology is not important, what you
right,
believe, but if what you believe doesn't cause you to do those other
to
things,
love people.
to love people,
Yeah. My
um,
husband tells a story and of another colleague who said he had a church elder come to him once, say, Pastor, I'm really, really struggling. He says, I know all of the things. I know all of the theology. I know all of the Bible verses. I know all this stuff, but I don't know how to love people. Can you help me figure out how to love people?
like it's a formula.
It's a formula, I guess. I don't know. So sad. I am so thankful for grace. Gives us all hope because if it was up to who deserved it, ain't nobody gonna make it.
Yeah. If you're watching this and you're feeling down or you're not sure about things, ask a different question when you read
Mm,
the Bible. Ask a different question. And if you ask a different question and you read through the parables, you will see parable after parable after parable that talks about how much God loves you, about how much the reward, the one you talked about with the workers, the reward is based on the person giving it, not the work that we as individuals do. There is so many stories in there if
mhm.
you look for them that says that God loves you.
And he's
And
looking
if
for
you
you.
already and
Yeah,
if you're listening to this and you already know that and you already believe all those things, then I hope that you don't miss any chance to practically and in a physical and real way share God's love with everyone you meet by feeding the sick and clothing the hungry.
yes. Yep. And remember, you've never looked in the face of someone that God has not loved, And that's, I think, something we forget sometimes as Christians when we get all judgy, you know. Um, I'm thankful for grace. we'll meet again another time for another conversation with Carrie and Dani. Thanks for joining us again, and we will talk to you all later. Bye.